Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud to be rising today on Bill C-21 and the amendment that was proposed by the Senate. And I will be splitting my time with the honourable member and my friend from Battle River, Crowfoot. Now, I must say, Mr. Speaker, this is could likely be the last time that I get to speak in this chamber, and it is with great, I guess, emotion that I am quite. I'm very fond of this place. There's so much history here. This building is so beautiful. There is so many great speeches that have been delivered in this chamber over the past century. And unfortunately, we do need to renovate this building. We need to upgrade it. And we will be moving into the new chamber over in the West Block. Now, I must say that the House of Commons, as much as I like to consider this as the House of Commons, the House of Commons is the body of people, us as commoners that gather together, and wherever we are is where the House of Commons shall be. And a lot of people may not realize it, but the green rug and the green decorum that we have in here represents the fields and the grass that the early House of Commons in Britain used to meet in. And they would meet in the common lands where they would gather and pass bills to hold the government to account. And so it is important that as members of Parliament, regardless of partisanship, we remember that principle, that first and foremost, that we are commoners elected to serve the people, and wherever we gather, whether it's in this beautiful chamber or it's in the temporary chamber that's been created in West Block, we will get the business of the country done. Those of us in opposition holding the government to account, and of course the government bringing forward legislation. And as private members, we have that opportunity as well. Now, it is my pleasure to be speaking on Bill C-21, Mr. Speaker, because this is a bill that is very similar to legislation that was brought forward by our previous Conservative government. And I must say that the Liberal Party at that time was the third party actually opposed this legislation, that they didn't believe that we need to improve our relationship on security matters across the border with our friends in the United States. Now, this is part of the Beyond the Border Action Plan, and I appreciate that Daniel Theron, the Privacy Commissioner, brought forward the amendment that was accepted in the Senate and that we're accepting over here, which is to make sure that any data that is collected on individuals, that personal data, is only retained for 15 years as part of the public record. So it is important that we address that need. Now, we've got to make sure that people understand that Bill C-21 is not only tracking people who arrive here in Canada, but this will now enable us to also track them as they leave. And this is what is of major concern to our security partners, particularly in the United States. So, so this is an obvious national security matter. And really, it does help us track those dangerous persons that may be entering our country and then leaving. It actually helps us deal with things like the Magnitsky Law that we passed in the last session, or in the last year, and that Magnitsky Law, which provides us with the opportunity to provide sanctions against those that are committing human rights abuses or are corrupt foreign officials. If they are coming here to Canada and then leaving, we need to know that they're coming here, and they could be actually trying to launder money or hide persons because they may be in trouble back in their own home country, say in the Russian Federation or in Iran or in Saudi Arabia for that matter. Now, but if you're going to have this information, you've got to be able to access it and use it for investigations. Some of those investigations involve criminal activity like fraud, including personality theft, identity theft. It could include even the fraudulent use of one's identity to come to the country. And we also know that this will help us in making sure that people that are permanent residents here are actually in compliance with the rules around permanent residency, because we know that some permanent residents, they come here, they get their applications done, they get accepted into Canada, and then they leave. And nobody seems to know that they've left and that they've returned back to their homeland, but yet they're in the process and on track to becoming citizens. So this is a system that needs this tool to ensure that Canada Canada Border Services Agency has the tools to do their job, and make sure that Citizenship, Immigration and Refugee Canada has the tools to do their job. But we do have a system that is incredibly backlogged, and it is often victimized by fraudsters, and so this will actually enable us to get that documentation information actually into the refugee court process, into the immigration court process, so that we can hold those individuals to account. Now, you know, the theme for 2018, when you look at the government, is that it has failed. The Liberal government has failed on so many different fronts. But when we talk about border security, we talk about national security, they have failed. We know that when they are trying to do border protection, we have, and we just witnessed in question period, this whole issue of ISIS terrorists who have returned to Canada. They actually have left this country to wage war against Canada and our allies, to commit mass atrocities and genocide against individuals and communities, and yet instead of stopping them from coming into Canada or arresting them at the scene, they have actually come into our country. All I have to do is say the name Abu Huzaifa, who's one individual who has been bragging about coming back to Canada, that he was untouchable by the unbelievers, and yet he has openly discussed all the atrocities he's committed with the media, whether it was CBC, whether it was with the New York Times. He's done podcasts and interviews on television documenting and confessing to the crimes that he's committed against those people that ISIS was waging war against and committing human rights abuses on. Now, when you talk about national security, and the reason we want to have Bill C-21 pass is because we want to build a stronger relationship with the United States. We want to build a stronger relationship with our security partners in the Five Eyes, the five nations where we share security information so that we keep our country safe and secure. The United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, of course, here in Canada. But how can we be a trusted security partner when we have a government that is prepared to allow Huawei, a Chinese corporation, to infiltrate our 5G network? A corporation from China that is beholden to the Communist government of China to actually take data that they come into contact with through their information and technology networks, like 5G, like their phones, their smartphones, like their computer systems, and share that with the Communist Party of China. Why would we want to why would anybody in the Five Eyes trust this Liberal government when they haven't shut down Huawei from accessing our new 5G spectrum? The United States have stopped them from selling smartphones and accessing their networks. Australia, New Zealand has stopped them. Orders have been given by the UK now to actually stop Huawei from selling their phones into government organizations, including their military, never mind participating in their 5G networks. So, again, we have a government that we're supposed to see them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We need to make sure that we can see that they take national security and border control seriously, but yet they turn a blind eye when it comes to Huawei. Now, you talk about border controls, and of course, the government likes to brag about all the Syrian refugees they've brought in. It does deeply concern me when I talk to refugees from the Yazidis community that they have actually seen on the streets of Canada, whether it's London, Ontario, or Winnipeg, Manitoba, where Yazidi refugees that have run away from being sex slaves, they've run away from genocide being committed against their community, they've run away from mass killings from the genocidal network of ISIS, and to arrive here in Canada and actually see their ISIS captors, the people that sold them into the sex trade. And luckily, they have reported these individuals to the RCMP and to the Ontario Provincial Police, and that those individuals are being apprehended. But I must say, it is disturbing that we're supposed to trust the Liberal government on border security. Our American allies are supposed to trust them, but yet we have all these ISIS terrorists who have returned to Canada. We've had these Syrian refugees that have been infiltrated by ISIS that have snuck into our country. And how are we supposed to know what the information is when the government can't get it right? We're supposed to be collecting this information on non-citizens and non-permanent residents that are coming and going from Canada, and yet we're allowing in people that actually have belonged to a terrorist organization like ISIS. And then, of course, all we have to do is look at the illegal border crossers, Mr. Speaker, in Manitoba, we see them coming across at Emerson from Minnesota and North Dakota, and Quebec, of course, are crossing over from New York. And that has cost this government $1.1 billion. Parliamentary Budget Officer has provided that information, and we know that has caused a great backlog. So, Mr. Speaker, it comes down to we need to have a good relationship with the United States, but we don't trust this Liberal government because they continue to fail on national security matters, they continue to fail on immigration, they have failed on managing our border with the United States and our other allies.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we have before us today is legislation that was introduced for first reading, had second reading, went to committee stage, went to third reading after a report stage. Then it went over to the Senate, and then the Senate had committee meetings, and then we have an amendment. And this has all been fairly healthy. We've had a lot of good discussions, questions, you name it, a great deal, Mr. Speaker. And my understanding is that everyone is supporting the legislation. Now, the Conservatives still want to continue indefinitely, ultimately talking and debating on this particular bill, yet the government does have an agenda. It's one of the reasons why we had to bring in time allocation. Otherwise, the Conservatives would continue to talk about this indefinitely. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering if my colleague could provide his thoughts as to on my comments.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Well, we may have had all the different stages gone through already, Mr. Speaker, but this is my first opportunity to actually speak to the bill. And I have to also remind the member that this is called democracy. We get to stand in this place and pronounce ourselves on legislation. It's my right and privilege as a member of Parliament to actually get up here and speak. And it's unfortunate that, again, we have a government that continues to move closure and shut down debate rather than allow members of Parliament to actually represent their constituents in this place. So I'm glad that I've been given this opportunity to get up here and speak to the bill, as well as some of the concerns that we have on national security matters that have been mismanaged by the Liberal government. It is an utter failure for them, and it's something that Canadians need to be aware of.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for York Centre.
I want to thank the Honourable Member for his remarks. I also want to take this opportunity to rise in this fine chamber, possibly one last time before the House rises, and say what an honour it is to represent Canadians and, of course, my constituents of York Centre. And I know that all of us, all members of Parliament, are going to miss for the next decade the ability to stand in this fine, fine room, speaking out and engaging in democracy for Canadians across the country. To the Honourable Member, he mentioned the Yazidis, and I have to say I'm proud of the action taken to bring so many Yazidis to Canada over the last number of years, something that happened with a consensus and an agreement between parties in this House. As it relates to this bill, it's clear that this will bring us up to the standard, and this will bring us on par with the action taken by our Five Eyes. It will make Canadians safer. It will ensure that we have more control over our borders, and organizations, including the airlines, have been on side with this. Does the member not agree that this is a good move and it's something that is going to keep all Canadians safer?
Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, it is a good move because it was originally legislation that came from the Conservative Party. So, of course, we think it's a good move. And I appreciate my friend's comments about this grand room that we get to rise in, and we're all going to miss it dearly. And maybe some of us might still be around in 10 years when it reopens and be refurbished. If I'm not, I shall return to see it myself. But I can say this, that we have to have a relationship with our Five Eyes partners. We have to be a trusted partner with the security of our information that we have. And as long as we have Huawei running around in our 5G networks, as long as we have them selling their smartphones in Canada, I think not just the government of Canada, but every Canadian has to be concerned that their private and confidential information is being shared with the Communist Party of China. And that has to stop. And so I do ask my friend from York Centre to actually step up and ensure that the government shuts down Huawei's activities in this country.